Welcome to the live stream. It's Memorial Day, so I'm sure lots of people have the day off. And if you're not in the States, maybe you don't. But yeah, this is going to be a two for not Tuesday, but a two for Monday because once again, we always have a JT's Mixtape episode number 31's coming on. But before that, I'm blessed enough to have an author, Guy Anderson, come on to tell us about one of the weirdest topics, I think, probably in the conspiracy game, which is the Cabbage Patch Kids and all the cloning and all the whatever weird thing happened in the late 19th century, early 20th century. But anyways, Guy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on, Joe. I really appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, of course. I know that we've tried to connect here recently, and it's just like obviously everybody gets busy doing all the things we're doing, but yeah. So let's get right into it. So I mentioned that you're an author, and you had two books, and we were just talking a little bit off air. Tell us about the first book, and then maybe we'll get deeper into the topics after that.
So my first book is Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids. Now, really, it's a book about Tartaria. And I consider Tartaria not to be a rabbit hole, but a warren, because to research Tartaria, you have these offshoots, and it takes you into Nikola Tesla, World's Fairs, Repopulation, resets, and so on. So there's a lot more to it. So rather than calling it a book about Tartaria, I wanted to connect a couple more dots for people. Now, I know that a lot of people are going to see Tesla and automatically think of the car, but it's Nikola Tesla. And for many people, that's a relatively new name. So it was a deep dive really into Tartaria and the associated subjects. But my favorite one is actually the Cabbage Patch baby postcards and the theory of repopulation. That's the one that I perhaps find the most intriguing of all.
Yeah, for sure. I'll share that. And I said, we're going to go about this like no one's ever heard of this. I know that a lot of people in the chat have, but yeah, like the Cabbage Patch thing is just so weird to me.
Yeah.
That they had these postcards. And do you have any idea on the dates on these? Because I mean, obviously, I just kind of know the general time frame, but when were they producing these kind of very bizarre art?
Well, actually, the 1800s is when they became popular. There was actually it's claimed that it was three sisters from New Zealand that actually started the Cabbage Patch postcards, but there's quite a lot of symbology in them. They became popular in the 1800s, going into the early 1900s. Originally, they started out in Germany, spread across Europe, perhaps France more than anywhere else, then into England, and then became very popular in America as well. And as you can see,
Yeah, let me see. I'm having a little issue with this browser.
I know that Utah's best crop. Yeah. I mean, that's bizarre, isn't it? Why would anybody want to buy that?
Like I said, I have no idea. I mean, I have no idea. It's kind of funny because I'm a kid of the 80s, so I did know about all the, obviously the Cabbage Patch dolls.
Yeah.
So that was what we would know about Cabbage Patch Kids would be, yeah, because obviously if you Google Cabbage Patch Kids, you're probably not, these are not going to be your first results. The first results you're going to get are dolls for little girls.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of an important subject to raise, because I believe that a lot of things are shown to us in ways in which we'll dismiss them, because I do think that the parasites, as I refer to them, are following some sort of fear of karmic retribution. When they get to meet their maker, they've got to be able to say that they told everybody what they were doing, all of the nefarious things that have happened, that they orchestrated. They can hand on heart say, well, we did tell them. These ones here in particular are quite interesting, because really there's a bit of imagery there from maritime law. I mean, that for all intents and purposes, the gardener, so to speak, is actually dressed very similar to a sailor, the red and white striped socks in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And that links to cabotage law, which is admiralty or maritime law. And cabotage law is the transportation of anything from one place to another. So if you were going to move some children, let's say the orphan train movement, but they were coming from overseas, as soon as they hit the port in New York, the docks, cabotage law then comes into play, and that is basically the rules and governance around moving the goods, be it people or equipment or products, from that port to the next destination. You know, whether that's a retailer, a warehouse, or whatever. That's cabotage law. So there's a little bit of symbology going on in those postcards, showing babies growing in cabbages, a little bit like, I suppose, a commodity or a batch, and at the same time, cabotage law, the transportation, the movement of these children from one place to another, i.e., repopulation.
Yeah, it's just it. I mean, that's what I said. It just kind of defies all kind of logic that this is
Hmm.
so prevalent. Like that, I don't even. I mean, that's the thing, and I think that's the thing that before I started to research this at all, I saw a few people making videos about it, and it was almost too weird that I didn't even care. It was so weird. But then eventually
Yeah.
it came up so much. I just thought, well, I mean, like, because I mean, I don't believe kids are grown in cabbage patches. But then you do kind of have to reconcile. Well, what does this mean then? Because this is really weird, you
Well,
know.
it's
So like,
Slavic
it's weird.
folklore.
It's weird in like a way that I know I really like Dr. Michael Heiser, the late Dr. Michael Heiser. He once said, and of course he's talking about the Bible, but he was saying if it's weird, it's important. And this might be fall under that umbrella. If it's this weird, well, it is kind of important to know why. At least I have some kind of an explanation for it.
Yeah, and I think that really it's a play on words. My mum is a classic example of this. She was brought up being told that she was found in a cabbage patch at the bottom of the garden, and a lot of people were from that generation and older. And it's Slavic folklore. They used to say that babies were born in cabbages because they didn't want to, allegedly, they didn't want to discuss reproduction back then. It was a taboo subject. So they used to tell the kids that they were born in cabbages, and that sort of that evolved into boys being born from cabbage seeds to and girls being born from rose seeds. It kind of evolved into that. But in different cultures, it can be a fruit tree. They're found at the bottom of the base, the trunk of a fruit tree, bottom of the garden. But it stems from Slavic folklore. That's where the whole cabbage patch thing comes from.
Yeah, we recently did a little bit of a dive into this on my buddy's podcast, Demon Racers, on the Ancient Angels podcast, and we were bringing up like the stork references because
Yes.
like we were, like because obviously I'm not this old and you're not this old either, but I remember growing up watching, like the Looney Tunes stuff, the Disney stuff, and very often they've shown like this idea that storks bring babies, or
Yeah.
sometimes they show like even there's that recent movie called Boss Baby, and
Yes.
the very beginning of that movie, all these babies are being made in a factory,
Mm.
and it's weird. And of course, yeah, like probably the normie take would be that, oh yeah, right. Well, they don't really want to get into the birds and the bees talk, so they would just say a stork dropped your brother through the chimney,
Yeah.
and that's how he arrived in a basket on the front step. But that's again, that's really weird. I mean, like, and so I was looking up
Yes.
some of the mythologies about that, and they were saying so there was things that what were told that parents used to tell young children about where babies came from. Sometimes they would say they came from a cabbage patch. Sometimes they would say they came from a stork from the sky. Sometimes they would say they came from the moon. Or there was another one where they said they found these babies down at the bottom of a well.
Yes. The water babies.
Yeah, and I mean, look at this very bizarre
Mm.
postcard of woman
Yeah.
fishing with a baby on a hook.
Yeah,
It's
so that
weird.
sort of slips into cabotage law because they are arriving by sea, by water.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's this showing us in plain sight what's been going on, but in a way we dismiss it. It's fiction, it's fantasy, or it's mythology. I don't know about you, but the older I've got, the more someone tells me something's a myth, the more likely I am to think that it's not. I think
Well,
a lot
or
of
yeah,
things have been
we've I've
twisted.
yeah, well, I've often said now that the more I've looked into mythologies, that we're told, like, it's like the definition of the word mythology has changed recently to just mean total fiction. But the more I've looked into it, mythologies are oral traditions, and they
Yes.
they come from a true place. So it doesn't mean we're not saying the mythologies are facts, but it makes sense to me that when you have this much smoke, there's fire somewhere. This is not just completely made up full cloth.
Yes, I agree totally. And I think that that's something that people need to look into. I'm a big believer. I might be going out on a limb here, but I don't believe in dinosaurs per se. I think that what they've done is they've taken what we would consider mythological beasts to be, and giants. And and anybody that wants to do some research, the Bible refers to giants. That I do believe that giants walked amongst us, and I think that they take the bones and turn it into something else, and then come up with a backstory with a set of animals, and all of a sudden we have this craze. I was a kid of the '70s, so growing up, I wanted to go to the Natural History Museum in London and see a dinosaur. Everybody did. We were buying toys, we were watching the films like Godzilla, and then later on Jurassic Park, and then all of a sudden it stopped, and it's almost like they've ticked that box and addressed that issue and moved on now to something else. So I think that they are hiding things in plain sight in such a way that we just simply dismiss it.
Yeah, well, put it this way, I'm right on board with you about the dinosaurs. I've often said that is that it's a what the dinosaur is. It's not that there weren't giant monstrous things.
Mm,
It's what they're really doing is it's a placeholder for evolution, because
yes.
you're dating the the planet, or whatever you want to call it, back 60 something million years or more. And then so this bone is evidence that the earth is this old. And then so it
Yes.
also is a cover up for, yeah, the mythologies about dragons and giants. Because, like you, I mean, I'm sure like everybody, probably every man in the chat was once a young boy, and I'm not saying the women couldn't have been into this too, but we're shown dinosaurs when we're little. We're shown outer space stuff. And so when they find a giant femur bone, oh, well, it's got to be a Tyrannosaurus Rex femur bone. It could never be a giant humanoid. Or if you find some monstrous looking skull, it couldn't be a dragon, even though to me, it's like, even if the word dinosaur comes from a Greek word that means terrible lizard. I mean, so a dragon would be a terrible lizard, but
Yeah.
we're told that that's not true. And I think that, yeah, to me, it's a cover story for explaining certain topics that they don't want to, they don't want to prove the mythologies, because if they start to prove some of the mythologies are actually legitimate, then obviously people start to look into books like the Bible and start to believe them.
Yeah, and that's the last thing they want. I mean, I don't know what it's like there, but here there seems to be a dire need for people to be switched off from religion, to the extent where they'll use different religions. Here we constantly in the news, people are sort of putting the Muslims and the Christians up against each other, when actually ultimately they're talking about the very same thing. And I think it's almost like they're trying to end religion here. And the older I've got, the more I've believed. As a kid, I wasn't interested, but as I've gotten older, I've started to realise that what I'm reading when I read the Bible is based on fact. I do believe what I'm reading, and I don't think the system likes that.
Oh yeah, no question about it. Well, I mean, obviously, when everything's explained with science, everything is a materialistic thing, and we grow up in materialistic world, and they want you to seek nothing but consumerism and just banal things, then you don't think anything higher than what you're doing. And I think, yeah, obviously it's a control mechanism in my mind that they would explain things that do have spiritual concepts in a material way. So therefore, yeah, we're disconnected from our creator and from faith and things like that. And those people are way harder to control than the people who are just looking for, you know, the next shiny object you can go buy at the store.
Yes. Yes, I agree. And that's the thing to get across to people, isn't it? That we are all connected to the creator. We're all connected. And and I think that that would be considered kind of mumbo jumbo, or in the mainstream. It's sort of almost expected to believe that I'm talking nonsense. But the more, as I said earlier on, the more you look into it, certainly with relation to me, for me with Tartaria, I use that term as a blanket term. I'm talking about the millennial reign of Christ. That is what I'm actually talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and nobody wants to, certainly the powers that be, they don't want us going there. They don't want us, they want us to treat that book as myth. Once upon a time, it was something that we lived by, and it's being destroyed intentionally, I believe.
Yeah, no question about it. Yeah, I'm glad you brought it there because, yeah, I'm not opposed to the term Tartaria because again, I think that it's a big cover up because it's funny because like I said, I always point out that I got this kind of old kitschy little map thing decoration, and of course it's got Tartaria on there,
Mm,
and so like that has become I think the more though I guess the more a lot of people have researched I think when for lack of a better term everyone used the term Tartaria to
yeah.
explain all the weird stuff. But I think that again, I think that Tatari is kind of a key to this because when they try to when they try to make people doubt that this civilization, this country, this nation, whatever it was, existed, it's like, but it's on so many maps. There's
Mm,
so much evidence that it did exist. So to me, this topic, the Cabbage Patch Kids, Tataria, the old world, the millennial reign, however you want to phrase it just to me it's proof that we're disconnected from our true history. And the real question we always have to ask is like why? Like why wouldn't they want us to know about this? And it just seems like that
mm,
there was a point in our history, which is likely somewhere probably around the 1800s, where all this stuff is coming up, is right around the time where the history makes no sense based on what the mainstream says. And it seems like right then that might have been the time where like we are truly disconnected from our true past. And then now
yeah.
we're sold this bill of goods in order to propagate whatever they want to do with society from here on out.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with you. And I think that the reason that they've removed this period of time, or these people, is because they want us to believe that things naturally happen, that we slowly evolve to where we are right now. But actually, if you look at where we are today, we are consumers, as you said earlier on. We're consumers. We're programmed to buy, to queue the, queue in the rain for the latest gadget that ultimately is just going to spy on us and
Right,
monitor us
exactly.
24/7, and then be proud that we've done it. Um, and so it's sort of we've forgotten really what we're here for. And I think by removing Tartaria and I believe bolting 800 years, I'm a big fan of Anatoly Fomenko's work. I think the timeline's been falsified. That they've created this new timeline where they've added 800 to 1,000 years
Mm-hmm.
on. So we've got this slow evolution of us being very primitive, and then slowly we become more sophisticated and slowly more technologically advanced. Then we have the Industrial Revolution and so on. Actually, I think we've gone backwards. I think that the millennial reign of Christ, they were using, or Tartaria, they were using, they were kind of, I like to use the expression, they were an echo of Atlantis. This is old technology that's been around since time immemorial, and we've gone backwards due to the greed of certain people. I do believe we're in Satan's little season right now, and it's about greed, consumerism. It's all of the sins if you like, a period of time where we lose connection with who we really are. We no longer build with passion and focus on frequencies and healing and the well-being of us and our environment. And now we build this sort of brutalism,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Ugly
these
things.
monsters. Yeah, and I
Ugly,
think the
ugly and
two.
disposable things.
Absolutely, and that's and the disposable bit's key because people say, well, it's brutalism, isn't it? And I said, well, yeah, the idea is that it's low vibrational, it's negative to look at, it's unpleasant, they're normally grey, um, and it's not just about that. I think that they're built that way now because they're easier to come back down.
Yeah, 100%. You know what's funny you say that though, that so with them adding time, which I agree, I said we've discussed a lot on this channel, is the Gunnar Heinsohn presentation about
Hmm.
the first millennia AD had 700 years added to it. The funny thing is, like, it's the contradiction. So they add all this time, but then if man is evolving, basically since whenever, obviously whenever he crawled out of the slime, but that you see the stuff that's Roman, and there's clearly a reset in there somewhere that they don't really acknowledge, because the Romans were clearly advanced, and I think that was one of my keys to understanding that the history does not make a lot of sense, is that the Romans were way more advanced than the people that came after them,
Hmm.
and we don't really know how they did certain things, and I never made sense to me, because if the Romans ruled the whole world, or at least the known world that they tell us, then they would have had governors and prefects and different kinds of rulers in different places, cities like London, cities like Paris. So if the Western Roman Empire falls in, like, literally in the city of Rome, well, they wouldn't lose everything they knew, because they built all this stuff all around the known
Yeah,
world. So how did the men that came after them not build upon that? And so that's when you get into the Dark Ages, where they say that architecture, culture, and language did not advance. But why didn't they advance? And I think what they
yeah,
try to do is they try to say, oh, because Christians were in charge then, and everything went backwards, and they hated science, and they hated all the sciences. But of course, like I said, it seems to fit in the narrative of Satan's little season. Of course, the church gets blamed for, like, the church holding men back from our true purpose and our destiny in different places, when it's exact opposite of what they say.
yeah. I totally agree with you. Yeah, absolutely. And for me, the Dark Ages is a period of time where nothing happened, and that isn't how it works. I mean, we progress. We I don't believe for one moment that we evolved from something that's climbed out of the slime. Um, but certainly with regard to technology and our understanding of things, I mean, for me, just in the last 10 years, my life is different due to technology.
Yep.
Us doing this now, this would have been, you know impossible going back sort of 20 years ago. So I understand that progress occurs regardless, but like you quite rightly said, you don't go from building these incredible, well, and the Greeks as well, these Greco-Roman buildings. You don't build things like that in colosseums, and then suddenly afterwards start going back to sort of almost primitive methods of construction. There is no logic behind that. It doesn't make any sense at all. So
Right.
I think that
No, go
they've
ahead.
just
Continue.
they've just thrown the Middle Ages and well, the Dark Ages in particular. I think that was thrown in to expand the timeline.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I mean, that's the thing. It's the contradiction again, that if you go into wherever you live, the oldest buildings are the most impressive ones.
Absolutely.
So, I
Yeah.
mean, so where's the rub? I mean, there's a rub there, and I think that, and they resemble, what we're told is, buildings from 2,000 years ago in ancient
Mm.
Rome. So why do the best courthouses, state houses, orphanages, insane asylums, whatever, medieval castles, why are those the most impressive structures, cathedrals, and all the like, when we have advanced to the point of having all this technology in our pocket and all the advancements in all the sciences, but then there's this backwards march, which is it's clear if any. I think most people know that things don't feel like they're getting better. I think most people
Uh,
that resonates
yeah.
with people. They're not getting better. So if they're not getting better, how long has the decline been? And I think now we're starting to pinpoint when the decline really was because we have advanced, obviously, when it comes to electronics, but lots of things like the food we eat, the buildings we live
Mm,
in, the kind of the quality of the places we live. Yeah, clearly those places, everything's going backwards. Especially like I said, I think Europe is probably one of the best examples because like cities like Paris, like the I've heard from a lot of people, and I hope to go one day. But a lot of people say that if you go to Paris now, people are disappointed when you get there because it's not quite like what they had imagined. Because the best things about Paris are the really old things, and
yeah,
everything that's been new that's been added to Paris is not good.
yeah. And it's the same here. If you look at the city of London, now we've got buildings like the Gherkin and these huge glass constructions. Now they might look impressive, but that building, as I said earlier on, they're not built to last, and there's no craftsmanship. Perhaps the most talented person on the job was the architect that designed something unusual. There's no skill. What we see in these Greco-Roman buildings, the stonemasonry is incredible. I mean, well, there we are. I mean, look, that will be around a lot longer than anything else they've thrown up this year. That's for certain. And these things were built to last with precision, um, and I think love. I think they're built with love.
Yeah, you don't build something like that without a real care for what you're doing, and
Yeah,
not just a paycheck.
yeah, exactly. And that does beg the question: where was there money during that period? Were they actually, or was it barter and trade? I mean, if you remove money from the system, and you take out, if you eliminated the Phoenicians and we don't have money, then all of a sudden you don't have that restriction, do you? And when you build something, it doesn't matter. You can take your time and make more of it. I think money is the cause a lot of the time for why we've sort of gone backwards with regard to architecture, at least.
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right that what I've concluded is that this does not make sense based on the monetary system we have currently. And how I know that
No.
is because they don't build things like this anymore. And see, I'm not one of those
Yeah.
people who say we could not build that, but it makes no sense based on the dollars and cents of everything. So if that's so, I mean, it's kind of like I believe that men are very capable of doing really, if men put their minds and hearts and energy behind things, we can do a lot. But this
Yes.
the scale and scope of all these places, the amounts of them, I think that's the thing. It's like it doesn't make sense to us now. So why would this make sense in a more primitive time to be able to do this? Unless
Yeah,
unless the
I
system was
agree.
different.
And the other thing to consider is that when you sort of dig into some of the backstories behind the construction of these buildings, and even buildings like the World's Fairs and the government buildings that have that Greco-Roman style, they'll often say that, what I've done is I've looked at the population for certain places to see how likely it would be that you had the workforce in place, especially if the city had had a fire recently or experienced a civil war. So there might be a bit of a reduction in the population, but they'll say, well, the population in this city at the time was 17,000. I'm thinking, well, now it's 500,000. So weren't they lucky to have so many skilled stonemason and artists available? And so I'll sort of challenge it a bit, and then they'll say, well, obviously people were brought in from further afield. So my answer to that one is well, that's fantastic, but you've got to consider that these structures were going up across the world at the same time.
Exactly.
Where did the workforce come from? And if they were all coming from one particular place, where did they stay? How long would that take to build? Um, Today that would take, I've got no idea what it would cost It's going to be astronomical, isn't it, in comparison to what we throw up now? The time and the skill behind that. You can't build that in every city in the world at around the same time,
Yeah.
following the narrative.
I would love somebody like maybe like a flamenco type to do some math on when, like, I always think like America's a really good example of this because of how quick the timeline, how the expansion westward and how fast everything starts to happen. And if you ever did like a spreadsheet and you took all the kind of old world looking buildings, cathedrals, and you put them when they say they were built, like, because it's funny in one of the towns closest to me, it's like a lot of the old great buildings are like all built in like 1894 or something like that. So
Yeah,
if you did say, okay, so what was built in America in 1894, and then you showed the list of the buildings, and then maybe you did some math on how many skilled craftsmen it would have took to build them very quickly. I think that would just expose the idea that the math does not math in that
yeah.
scenario. And I want to ask you real quickly because we'll
Mm.
get right back to you where your book is. So a lot of people have talked about and noticed, of course, if you're looking at the cathedral right here, it looks like there's antiquitech. It looks like something to do with harnessing electricity on this building. Is this somewhere where you made the connection between somebody like Nikola Tesla and some of this architecture? Do you think that he had some knowledge of this, or he was reverse engineering some of the technology that was obviously predated himself?
Well, this is a kind of can of worms I'm going to open.
Okay, well, good.
I'm still debating on whether or not Nikola Tesla actually existed.
I've heard
Um,
that theory too. I've heard a lot of people say that because what is it, the amount of patents that he filed in a very short amount of time, it was kind of inhuman.
yeah, but there are other sort of stranger anomalies to Tesla. For example, now he never had sex. So he has no offspring. There are no descendants from him. But he did have siblings. One died. His older brother died when he was younger. It fell off a horse. Um, but I cannot find a single living descendant. And I've reached out. I contacted his museum, and they said that they didn't know the whereabouts of any of his descendants. The other thing is that if you look for video footage of him, this is a pioneer of technology who gave public talks and lectures
Hmm.
and allegedly wrote for journals and magazines. People would pay him to come to dinner if they were having a dinner party. Everybody wanted him. He was top of the list. But there's no video footage of him, yet there is of his rival Edison, and there also is of Einstein, who once famously said that if you want to know who the most intelligent man in the world is, you need to speak to Nikola Tesla. So you've got someone at the really the forefront of technology with no video footage and no living descendants and just a handful of images. We always see the same ones of him over his entire lifespan. So I find that strange. Um, and to do what, as you quite rightly said, to achieve what he did in quite a short period of time is unusual. So I've been appealing for people to find video footage of him. It's normally that picture that we see.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
for sure.
Frank Zappa, as I like to call him. Um, so that's my first thing. The second thing
I
is,
would just say I want to stick on that for just one
sorry.
second. It is kind of
Mm.
interesting because yeah, you're right that what. So what year is it? Did he sub? Or are we told that he died?
Well, he died. I think it was 46.
Yeah, so that's
Um,
obviously well in the times where they would have had opportunity to have probably people be interview him for
yeah, absolutely.
for TV and everything. Because
Yeah,
obviously we have like, a lot of us who look into a lot of the weird stuff. We always pull up the old interviews of like Admiral Byrd and people like
yes,
that. And so yeah, I guess they would have been pretty close to contemporaries in that kind of
yeah,
field. And so it is interesting to the narrative too, is that Nikolai Tesla was a brilliant man, but yet he was mysterious, and also he ended up kind of getting screwed out of his greatest works, and then he
yeah,
dies penniless. Well, I guess that kind of does fit the narrative. If like, listen, you didn't want this guy to exist, or if this guy did not exist, well, where did he live? Oh, well, he didn't own anything at the end of his life. So therefore, you
Yeah.
can't say this is his old house, this is his old lab, this is all this old stuff. Now, that's interesting. That is interesting. Yes, that is weird. That's actually something similar that I stumbled across because I live probably about 90 minutes from the first flight, like the Wright brothers, and
Right. Okay.
the Wright brothers both had like really weird stories where they didn't live that long, they had no kids, that kind of thing. So like maybe that does, like, it seems like the paper trail goes very cold very quickly with somebody who invented the airplane.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the same is true of Shakespeare and lots of other Napoleon. I mean, that I sometimes wonder if they just create someone uh, to support a backstory. So, for example, if you look at the Napoleonic Wars, to blame it all onto one person who, literally by 25 years old, is considered to be the most powerful and the most, I suppose, effective war machine that exists, and when he's not out there, um, you know, in battle, he's writing romantic novels. And then and then he became, and this is all in his 20s, and then he's ruling France, and I think, oh come on, this is ridiculous. If that really happened, and he was the person that they say he was, then I would have thought right now we would know who his descendants are, and they'd be on TV. They'd have a podcast. Well, my great was Napoleon Bonaparte. Where is he? My great granddad was William Shakespeare. Where are these people? So I do believe that they just create um, characters to support a narrative, and so we can just, again, it's another box ticked, isn't it? Um,
Right, and
and like all,
of course, is like his rival would have been Thomas Edison, who we would
mm,
know who's in the secret society club. So is
yes,
it possible that that guy was not legitimate either, and he's all these things were attributed to him? Did he create it, or he bought
yeah,
the patents, and he wasn't actually the one who did all the work? Like, it is kind of funny too that a lot of people, I even saw some people in the chat mention 25 years ago we never learned about Tesla, and we didn't know anything about
yes,
him. And it is kind of funny to think about, like, so in our recent past, he's been coming up a lot more, like movies like The Prestige. But it's funny, like I was just saying it, like if you wanted to use Google to look up Cabbage Patch Kids, well, you're going to get dolls. And now
yeah,
if you Google Tesla, the first thing you're going to get is Elon Musk in his cars. You're not going to get Nikola
yeah.
Tesla. So it's kind of like he was introduced to us very quickly, and then now he's being swept back under the rug. Maybe because the more people do kind of look into him or more interested in him, they'll find out like the story is actually kind of paper thin.
I agree, and that's something that I noticed, and something that I talk about quite a lot when people um, attack me, I suppose, is the best way of describing it, for even contemplating that Nikola Tesla didn't exist. Um, that's always what I'll be hit with. And there is nothing left, is there, of him? That he didn't leave anything behind, as you quite rightly said. You know, there are no buildings. He lived in the Hotel New Yorker. It was
Right.
paid
He's living
for
in hotels.
apparent. Yeah, two. He's got two hotel rooms. Um, he says, Nikola Tesla says that he received all of the information to go on to make his patents through visions. He would have these kind of
Right.
blackouts,
Mm-hmm.
and that came from his mother. His mother had the same thing. Then he's talking to Venetians. He actually believes he's in communication with Venetians. And I think actually what's going on there is one of these societies have the technology from the old world and they're reverse engineering it. That's what I believe took place. And you credit someone a little bit like a lot of people believe that Albert Einstein got all of his information from his wife who worked at the patent office.
Okay.
And that, yeah, and that she was the brains behind it all. And they put him out there because people weren't going to listen to a woman at that period of time. But yeah, you're quite right. You go onto the internet and you type in type in Tesla, you're going to be hit with cars. Type in Nikola Tesla, we're going to see a few images and a bit more information now. But if he is the person behind the light bulbs in my house and the radio controlled car that I had as a kid, and um, you know, to take direct current and give us alternating current so we can have what we have around us, electrically speaking. I would have thought I would have learned about him at school, but I didn't. Tesla was not talked about until relatively recently.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting too? I want to. This might be a jumping off topic. Is that doesn't the narrative say that when they had the Columbia exhibition in 1893 in Chicago, it was Tesla and other people are the ones who ran all the wires and illuminated it.
Yeah,
Now, I
yeah,
mean,
apparently.
that's one of the funniest ones to me because I'm like thinking they built so this technology is obviously brand new at this point. And so they built all these buildings for this World Fair. And not only that, they lit them all up. And this is a
Mm,
time before you would have been able to mass produce light bulbs. So, I mean, I
yes,
don't even know how many light bulbs it would have, I don't know how much wire it would have taken to wire all those buildings.
yeah.
And then it's like two guys. And of course, dead men tell no tales. So, like, what did Tesla ever say about, I mean, that would have been a feat of ingenuity and all the things to be able
Mm,
to do that in such a short period of time before he invented alternating current and then to eventually light up something that's the biggest buildings in the whole world.
yeah. Well, actually, he never said anything about it at all, is the answer to that.
Well, that makes sense to me because I haven't ever heard what he said about that. You'd think there
No.
would have been books written about that.
Yeah, exactly. And there isn't. And why, why are we taught about Thomas Edison? At school, we were taught about Thomas Edison. Well, Thomas Edison is only half of the story. For me to be sat in that classroom with the lights on, you'd have need Nikola Tesla's involvement. So why weren't we told? I mean, he is a relatively new name to many people, and now Tesla is just a car manufacturer, isn't it? It's already gone, and it's all very clever, isn't it? Because you can hide the Cabbage Patch babies, the reproduction postcards, by bringing out a doll, and then you can hide Nikola Tesla by bringing out a car brand with the same name. And I think it's intentional, absolutely intentional.
I mean, I don't know how legit that picture is, but I was looking for ones that night of some of these exhibitions, and yeah, they're all lit up.
Yeah, yeah, and they were all. I mean, the same was true in Paris. They were all illuminated, and it's impossible because not only is the backstory to the World's Fairs and Expositions. I mean, look at that. I mean, imagine what power you're drawing to do that.
Right, right. Well, I mean, I know a lot of people in the community there got a little bit upset with John Levi when he came out against the Little Season and the Book of Revelation. But I mentioned that he took that video down and he said he was sorry. But he wrote a very excellent book. If you guys have not checked it out, it's Evidence of the Old World. And so, kind of in the same way I was saying, like, you need kind of people to do the math on some of this stuff. And he talked about the city of San Francisco, and he talked about I guess it was called, was it like the Midwinter's Fair? And I think that
Yeah,
was in 1894 in San Francisco. And of course, once again, that place was illuminated. And he started to do the math on what it would have taken to power something like that and where they would have got the power from. And yeah, I mean, when you did look at, like, when somebody actually does the math on it, it makes no sense. And of course, this is way bigger. But yeah, but this is one example in Chicago. But then you have St. Louis. Yeah, I guess you had San Francisco. You have stuff in Philadelphia. You have stuff in Nebraska. It's literally like everywhere. And like I said, you said in over in London, Paris, lots of other cities,
yeah.
and it's all
Samoa,
around the exact same time.
Tasmania.
The time when electricity would have been brand new, it would have been so impractical to be able to do this stuff, only for them to supposedly tear it all down and throw it all
Yeah.
away in short order afterwards.
Yeah. The backstory to the World's Fairs is ridiculous anyway. One of my favourites is Crystal Palace in London. Um, that one's fantastic because the architect behind that won the contract by entering a competition. So within 2 weeks of entering the competition, he'd won. They'd written to him to let him know the good news, and he was on site 2 weeks afterwards. What they don't tell you is the architect lived in Australia. So he had to apply by writing, which would have been sent by ship. He would then have been notified by a letter that was sent back to him by ship that he'd won. Then he's got to get on a ship and get to England. Now, I estimated that as being around 18 months. But 2 weeks after the competition winner was announced, he was on site building it.
And that would have been
Stunning,
like pretty
isn't
much
it?
like the furthest place away in the whole world, almost at that
They
point,
couldn't have
right?
picked anywhere further. Yeah. And they're incredible, aren't they? But they all suffer the same problem. They all have accidental fires or they're demolished, as you said
Yeah.
earlier on.
What
The
was the one?
fires are incredible.
What was the one that the first supposedly what there was two crystal palaces, and
Hmm.
one of them
Yeah.
they built it for one of these fairs, and then they took it apart and rebuilt it somewhere else, and you're thinking like, what kind of
Yeah.
ridiculous story do they want us to believe? Because again, this is interesting because you don't have mass production of glass like this, and again, obviously, even
Yes.
if you did, these things are not standard glass panels. It's like this is
No.
obviously very unique to this building. So
Mm.
like how could they produce this much glass in this short amount of time? And then again, you're talking about taking this apart. It's made of glass.
Hmm.
Like so how much of it would have been broken in transportation and trying to try to carefully demolish this place. And what I think was it one of them, isn't it that there was like a full grown tree in it?
Yes, that one there. Yeah, there's a full grown tree in it.
How
Um,
did that happen? And
yeah, exactly.
how did they get
Well,
the
they
tree in
built
there?
around the
They
tree.
built around the tree.
Yeah, and it's nonsense. And you're quite right. I mean, you look at the logistics involved in the transportation of that glass today. I mean, how many trucks are we talking about there? What size factory would you need? Um, you know, the skill. How many glaziers do you need to do that? It's how long do you think that would take to build? And they've always got these sort of very short build times of a year, sometimes even less than that. But to take one down, and then we're talking horse and buggy again, or horse and cart, we're transporting all of that glass just a few miles up the road, and then we're going to build something almost identical. That so where I'm sat with this is that they were both there. There were two crystal palaces. There were crystal palaces in other countries. Canada had a crystal palace. I can't remember the city.
Oh, really
Um,
interesting.
yeah, yeah. So there's a crystal palace in Canada. Um, but I think okay, I understand why you might want to put a false narrative in there, so that we can go along with this evolution, but to actually destroy something like that, I just cannot believe that anybody out there would do that, and they did, and not just once. They all had these fires, didn't they, or were demolished.
Yeah, no, I
Um,
think I remember there was. I know that again. I bring up John Levi. I'm pretty sure that he did a video about the Crystal Palace, and I think what did he say that the day it burned down, it was like a man and his daughter Crystal were walking by as the thing was. They were the first person to alert people that it was on fire.
mm,
It's like the narrative is just so dumb. And the
yeah,
funny part about it is again, people often talk about the buildings, which are incredible. But then you see it's like, you don't just build a building and it's just like on the grass. Like look at all the stuff that's around it.
yeah,
Like there's
yeah.
there's
Just the
so much, all
grounds.
the steps and like obviously the
Yeah,
ornate stuff around the thing and the stone and the statues. This stuff was obviously there
yeah. The
for
airship tower.
it looks old. Yeah, yeah, like there you go. Yeah. Right. So
Mm,
it it makes little sense. I mean, it looks like it must have been some kind of a greenhouse type thing. I mean, that's what I'm guessing
yeah,
it
I
was.
believe so. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I think that not just trees. I mean, we know that there were trees that were significant compared to what we have today, but I think fruit, um, all fruit and fauna, I think was grown in a much larger way than it is today. I think that from what I've read and from what I've sort of studied, there appears to be a lower level of oxygen in our atmosphere than there was then, and it's stifled the growth of a lot of things. And those palaces were, massive greenhouses, absolutely. And you can see the airship docking station there.
And you see
But
all the
just the
and all the
grounds,
fountains as well. The grounds are incredible.
yeah, yeah, and the fountains themselves. I mean, that's an incredible amount of power needed to be doing that.
Hmm.
Um, so I think if you got rid of the building and just looked at the landscaping of the gardens themselves, that would have taken longer than the palace, if we follow the narrative. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah. No.
so
Yeah. No question about it. Like I said, you don't see things done like this anymore. But it was very common, and again, like they all come about around the same time, which again
mm,
does lead you to the question and the things like, well, who are doing these things? And this seemed like this would have been a very profitable thing to continue to do if you had this kind of skill. But then yet it dries up. And again, I have that construction background, and we can't even get people to do normal plaster anymore, much less stonework.
mm. So as far as I can see, we are talking about a different civilization altogether, and certainly a different ethos.
Right. I think that I try not to get too far out there to act like I know how things were done. But I think that to me is seems like a fact to me is that they were living under a different economy, a different kind of circumstance.
Mm,
Because the way that we're kind of taught is that the people who did build it, they went back to their wooden shanties at the end of the day on their horse and cart. Meanwhile, they're building palaces all over the world.
yeah,
And to me that's what seems very suspicious is that you're just thinking about like you could do anything just to kind of get by, and then somebody tells you to build this, and you're thinking, well, this is going to cost a lot because there's nothing like this. And
mm,
then they tell you, okay, now you need to take it apart and go put it somewhere else. Well, I'm going to need to get paid a lot more than that.
yeah,
And if those people are not all super wealthy doing that kind of work, well, why not? Because I
yeah.
mean, they don't do it now, and why can't we do it now?
No, exactly. And you would think, okay, they've given us a backstory for the architect, which is a fantastical one, because it involves some sort of time travel, or he was the first person to have a private jet, where everybody else was using ships and hot air balloons. But who was the builder? What company did they get in? Who was the contractor? Who were the stonemasons? Who were the sculptors? Because there are some incredible statues.
Right.
Um, who were the sculptors of those? Where are the statues now? Surely they couldn't have burnt as well. I mean, to burn glass and metal. I mean that's perhaps one of the best images of inside. I mean, look at that, all burnt,
But
destroyed by fire.
I mean, what's
Who built
funny?
that?
Just even thinking about that, it's like again, like how did they get it that in there?
Mm,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, did they like the tree? Did they build it around the statues they put in there,
yeah,
or were those
exactly.
in
And
many pieces? Because that thing looks gigantic. Because if you do see how big the outside of it is, and I think that's the one thing I've noticed, especially when you do this kind of research, like boots on the ground. You see pictures of these places. They never do it justice until you actually go stand next to one of the columns. And if you take pictures of people, if you take a picture of the building, make sure you get somebody on the steps or near the building because these buildings are enormous.
yeah, I mean, you can see there um, at the bottom. I think just before
Oh
what
yeah,
appears to be
these
the
chairs.
chairs. To give you an idea, I mean, I don't know if those statues are life size, but the smaller ones, I don't think they are. But even those in comparison, I mean, look at the door, the dark door in the centre
Right.
of
Hmm.
that block that they're stood on. I mean, even the door itself, it gives you an idea of scale, doesn't it? Just from the
Yeah, if
door or
that
the
door is
chairs of
anywhere
what we're
around eight
talking
foot
about.
tall, if it's about 8 foot tall, I mean, when you're talking about 16, 24, 36, 40, 44, 52. I mean, these statues are like 70 feet tall.
Yeah, yeah. And again, horse and cart. So
Right.
either if even if they were coming in segments and constructed there, I mean that's a mammoth task, isn't it? And who was the sculptor behind those? Something
And why
like that.
Egyptian things in
Yeah, I
London?
know. Yeah, yeah, it's very strange. Built on ley lines. Um,
This is another picture of them.
Absolutely incredible, aren't they?
Interesting that they're darker complexion. That's interesting. I'm sure a lot of people will find that
Yes.
interesting. Yeah, it's just all this stuff is just totally bizarre. I want to get us back on track though. I mean, not that we haven't been on
Mm,
track, but let's talk about like your best guesses on like what were there was some kind of a cloning technology about the Cabbage Patch Kids, or is the Cabbage Patch Kids, is it just a an allegory about maybe the orphan trains in the repopulations of places? Is this literally some kind of technology involved that these kids
mm.
were literally not born the old-fashioned way, or were they just trying to explain why, hey, there's a bunch of kids in the city now. Where did they come from? Oh, they came from the stork. They came from a well. They actually probably came by trains because
Yeah,
these cities had no people in them and they needed to repopulate them.
yeah. I think that there's a few things there combined. So, first of all, if you look at the population, so if people want to jump on the internet and have a look at the population in 1776 for the world, we're talking about 77 million people. That's the estimate given. By 1876, that had quadrupled. But what people then need to look at is the number of deaths. So we had, I mean, the best conservative guess of the population in 1876, 100 years after, the introduction of New World Order, and which, most people will see on the back of the American dollar bill, New World
Mm-hmm.
Order, 1776. So we've got 1776 as, I suppose, I like to use that as my starting point. We then go and look at the estimated world population, and it was around 77 million. And then by 1876, sorry, I got my maths wrong. By 1876, it had doubled, which is an incredible feat in itself. To double the population of the world in 100 years is you know, that's pretty miraculous. But what you then need to look at is the death toll for the same period of time, through war, through natural death, and through genocide and famine. And you're talking there, best estimate, at over 3 billion. So your world population is 1.3, 1.4 billion, but you've lost in that 100-year period over 3 billion people. So the sums don't stack up. There's something wrong somewhere. And also, but people have argued with me that the reason there was a bit of a population boom between 1776 and 1876 is because people wanted to reproduce. They wanted to start a family before the man went off to war, in case he didn't come back. Well,
They didn't want families if they didn't go to war.
yeah, it's strange, isn't it? Because we're also told that a lot of the farms back then, they would have they would have anything and sort of 11, 12 children, because they were all going to be working on the farm. So
Well,
none of that doesn't stack up.
I mean, if you go back and you read any history, I mean, go read one of the oldest history books we have is the Bible. It was a good thing to have children. People
Yeah.
always wanted to have children, and families wanted to have heirs. And so I think I mean, it makes perfect sense that if you did have this kind of more, localized economies and you had families who did certain business, well, you'd want children to take over the businesses, and you would always wanted that. Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. I'd seen something different. I heard that there was 1 billion people in 1800. That's what I read. That I mean, again, I don't know where exactly I got that source from, but even still, if you go from in 1800 1 billion to 2025 over 8 billion, I think it's really interesting. We've talked about this a few times recently on the channel. That I don't know about where you live, but your story is probably similar to all of us. Is that I've never seen a new graveyard being established in my lifetime, and I've never heard of an existing one running out of room. When you really would think that, like in the time period between, especially like a place like America, that's really doesn't these cities don't even exist in 1800 westward,
Mm.
and then you have this many people come in there, and obviously a lot of people are living and dying in between these 225 years. Well, where are they all getting buried?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, like there is something off
Mm.
about that.
Yeah, so well, first of all, I think that the what we're told about the world population is wrong. I think they heavily inflate
You don't think that
the
there's
world
8 billion
population.
8 billion people here?
No, and Russia and Japan have been studying recently. There's a little bit going around on YouTube about it, but Russia and Japan have been looking at the population of China, and they estimate it to be a third of what we are told. And I think that that's probably true of a lot of places. You know, the World Economic Forum might say that we're overpopulated, but I think that that's a false narrative. I don't think we are overpopulated, and I don't think we ever have been. And as you quite rightly said, what are they doing with all the bodies?
There
You
would be
know,
a
and
lot. There'd be a lot. And you know what you said is interesting. I can't remember where I saw this stat at, but they said if you just go based on if you took every city, the totals from every city in the world, and you added the totals up, I think you might only get around 2 billion people, something around that range. So then you'd have to conclude that the rest, the six, come from places not cities,
yeah,
like rural
rural
area.
areas.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, that doesn't seem really likely. You seem like you'd have way more
No.
people in the cities. So yeah, I've heard that often is that some people have estimated that the population might be closer to 2.5, 3 billion
Yeah,
people.
yeah, I think so. And it's all part of this narrative, isn't it? To depopulate. And when I was a kid growing up, there was a program called Tomorrow's World, and it used to showcase new technology. And each device, I suppose, that they brought out, from the microwave oven to automated, anything automated, that it was going to be a time saving commodity, that we were going to have more time by my age. I'd
Right.
have so much tech doing things for me that I'd be able to, sit on a sun lounger and read, or travel a bit more. But actually, what you found is the more technology we've got, and the more we progress technologically speaking, the less time any of us have to do anything. When I
100%.
was a kid, most mums stayed at home, and I'm not saying that that's a good thing or a bad thing, but most mums stayed at home. Mum took us to school, mum picked us up, mum spent the day as a housewife. That was her job. And now mum and dad both go to work just to pay the bills.
Yeah,
You know,
that's absolutely true.
what happened?
It's funny that's I know that show Fallout. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It comes from the
Yeah.
video game, and I know that's kind of like what they are showing in a kind of obviously a fictional past, that all this technology is going to lead to. Yeah, right. Like I mean, I think that we're shown like the cartoons like the Jetsons, where they don't have to do
I
anything.
still
Like
love
literally,
that.
they have robotic maids, and they don't have to clean up,
Mm,
and they don't have to do anything. They don't even have to worry about what they eat. And
mm,
then yeah, you're absolutely correct. Is that the more technology is advanced, is like it costs more to get it, and then we're just spending our money on it, and our money's not worth as much as it used to. I think it's really
mm.
interesting, and especially in America, a lot of people are familiar with the politician Elizabeth Warren. So she was obviously a very prominent Democrat in America, and but she once wrote a book that would seem very conservative now, and she called it the two parent income trap. And it was like the more everyone works, it's like the more, it's kind of like the scarcity of things. So like there's more money, so therefore more money gets spent, and therefore you need more money. When, yeah, back in the day, it was not unreasonable for somebody who have a regular job to be able to buy a house, a car, and then one parent stay at home with the children. And
Mm.
now people are like making a lot. I mean, what you consider a lot of money, and they're by far not well off. They're not well off at
Mm.
all. They're not saving any money. They're literally just leveraged higher than most people are.
Yeah. Yeah, and we are debt slaves ultimately, and that's the idea, isn't it? We're in this trap, and as I said earlier on, we will queue in the rain to get the latest iPhone or whatever it is that ultimately is just really tracking us now, tracking what we spend because we upload our payment details into it. Allegedly, it takes a photograph every 20 seconds of what it can see. It's
Oh
probably
God.
listening the whole time. So we're queuing. We're going to pay over the odds because we want the latest iPhone before our friends or before next door get it. We want a better car than them. We want to go on nicer holidays. We want a bigger house than our friends. We want a nicer watch. And for what? Does it make you live longer? Are you happier? Are you is your connection stronger? Do you feel loved more? Are you less likely to die or become ill because of that? And what you've actually done is you've then gone out to try and earn more money so you can get that better car, so you have to work harder. And then you move along again because that's not good enough. So you want an even better car because next door's just got the same model as you, but it's a year newer.
And they
So you
cost more to
have to,
fix. They cost more to fix now.
yeah. And I think that that's what they've done. This consumerism. People are just rubbing their own egos, and I think that to lose your ego, or at least lose the majority of it, it is vital to get off this hamster wheel, this sort of cycle that we're going through, where you know it's sold to me as a kid that if I go to college, if I go to university, I get a good job. By the time I'm in my 50s or 60s, I get to retire, and then everything will be paid for, and I can go off and travel the world. But in reality, you work your fingers to the bone. You accumulate an incredible amount of debt. You come home from work exhausted. You put the TV on and get programmed a bit more. You eat heavily processed food because you're on the go all the time. And then retirement day comes. You're too exhausted to do anything. You have a heart attack and keel over. And that
Yeah,
kind of
sadly.
seems to be, what happens for a lot of us, unless we have some sort of serious illness along the way, or on the contrary, a lottery win. For most of us, that is going to be how it is, and that's exactly, I think, how they want us to be. We're obsessed with tech, buying the latest technology, with earning more money, and what we're not obsessed with is living in the moment, appreciating what's around us, and giving a bit of love.
Yeah, yeah, 1000%. Actually, I was just thinking about that. Is it so? My grandfather, he passed last year. We went to his funeral on last Tuesday or last Wednesday.
Oh man, I'm
Well,
sorry
it's
to hear
okay. I
that.
mean, he lived to be 99. He had a full life,
Oh, okay.
but I was, and then my father had passed last year, and my father-in-law passed this year. And I really started to think about it at one point that like you do get to people when they're a certain age, and then they would probably say, "Oh, all the things I worried about really weren't that big of worries after all."
Mm,
And you really do think that like if you're in the audience today, especially obviously if you're trusting in the Lord, it is kind of interesting to think that there are certain things, because I mean that is, I feel like that's the matrix they've got us in, is you
yes.
have to pay the debt that you've incurred. So it's really hard to get off the hamster wheel because yeah,
Mm,
you owe lots of people. But when you really think about it, what we would, your freedom is more valuable than whatever stuff you're working to pay for
yeah.
sure. And you really think about it, like, yeah, that if you're like in that kind of moment where like, should I continue to do this? This is a safe way to go versus kind of take the chance to do the thing, to see the things and kind of I don't know. It's kind of like whatever that is for everyone else. I mean, of course, that's where I'm feel like that the Lord is leading me. That you don't want to get to the place in your life where you are kind of old and broken, and you're like, man, why didn't I just take that step out in faith and do something when you had the opportunity? Because I do think that's what life's about. Is that because yeah, taking the safe route is like this. It's like the slave route. I mean,
Yes.
clearly, it's like because it's like, oh, I have to pay for all this stuff, but it's like, but do you really need all that stuff? And it's funny. When people do kind of like declutter and they get rid of some things, they feel
Mm,
better because
yeah.
it's like, yeah, it's like that thing from Fight Club when it says the things that you own end up owning you. Really,
Yeah.
really wise point. But I want to get you back to that point because we went off on a tangent. It's probably my fault. So we were talking
No, I'm
about.
very good at that, Joe.
No, I am too. Is that we were talking about how that you don't trust the population numbers in these cities, and especially when
Mm,
even if we just go by their numbers, whatever they are, there's way less people in these cities, and it's kind of weird that that's one thing that people have pointed out rightly is how do you justify the sizes of these cities when the populations are so much smaller? And then you think about the expansion westward in America, places like another place, like you said, Australia, makes no sense that these cities are pretty heavily developed at a time when there would have been no reason to justify building all of the stone and post office and capitol buildings in that time. So do you think that the Cabbage Patch there's a connection between the effort to in the orphan trains, or is it, or this? Do you think these topics are separate?
do you mean regarding the buildings, or do you mean is there a connection between the Cabbage Patch Babies and the orphan train movement?
Well, the way I kind of have thought about it is that these cities already exist, and I don't know really
Yes.
exactly. So these cities already exist, and the idea of these places being founded in certain time periods,
Hmm.
we often say, what if that means just they were found? And so they go out west, they find a city,
Mm,
they need people to live there. And so
yeah.
that's in those orphan train stories is that they had orphanages out east, places like New York, and they would send the kids all the way across the whole country in order to
Mm,
live in a different place. I
mm.
mean, if they weren't trying to repopulate a place, I don't know what else they would do.
Yeah, no, I agree. And where did the children come from? Where did we suddenly see an upsurge in orphans? And of course, overnight we have orphanages open all across the world. It was everywhere, and they are the same old buildings that we've come to call Tartarian, these Greco-Roman buildings. For orphanages, for asylums, and early prisons too. So I think that for me, the orphan train movement was relocating children from the old world.
Mm-hmm.
I think they were brought over to New York and then shipped around from there, almost like a hub, if you like. Because why would New York be the only place in the world where they are saying in the newspapers that they have an epidemic of children? They're overrun with orphans. Why there?
Because
And
yeah,
people will
would
say,
make sense is that's where people came over to America. That's where they
yeah,
stopped is New York.
yeah, and along the way, perhaps the parents are disposed
It
of,
was like
or the
Ellis
parents were
Island.
before.
Mm-hmm.
Ellis Island, yeah, that was kind of like a sorting hub, wasn't it?
Right,
Like a big Amazon warehouse.
right.
Um, so I think it's a mixture of things. Here in England, we had baby farms, and baby farms were where you would take your newborn baby if you didn't want anybody to know that you'd had a baby. So let's say it was out of wedlock, and they would go to a baby farm, and they thousands and thousands of children were shipped from baby farms to America and Australia, often without the mother's knowledge. The mother would pay for the upkeep of the child until they were in a position to be able to take the child back. And that was always the hope, or that they would be adopted. But sometimes they would go back to the baby farm, and a lady called Amelia Dyer ran the largest one in England, in London. They'd go back to collect the baby, and the baby's gone. It's in America or Australia. So I think that there were a combination of things here. You've got a lot of people that die, a lot of men dying in war, a lot of women, because when the Lunacy Act was introduced,
Right.
your husband dying in battle was grounds for the wife to be committed to an asylum. That was one of the reasons on the Lunacy Act.
Wow, I've never heard that one. That's wicked.
Yeah, so the Lunacy Act's fantastic. If you read it, and I don't mean that in a positive way, I actually mean fantastic as in fantastical. Um,
Hmm.
Falling off a horse, reading too much, but the best one of all, and this is why it was so important that the men died in battle and the women, no matter what, lost their children so the children could become property of the state. Women's problems. If you suffered every month from women's problems, that was grounds to be committed.
Oh wow, that's well, I
Mm.
mean, I was gonna make a joke there, but I
Well,
won't.
you might
I
go.
won't.
Now I want to
I don't
know
want to
what
have
it
all these people
is.
that follow. Well, you know what they said. No, I'm not gonna even get into it. But yeah, but the point is, like, yeah, that's. I know that we had talked about this recently on the podcast too. Is that I know my good buddy Alpha Talks. He showed me some articles that religious fanaticism was another reason people got locked up
Yes,
in insane
yes, it was.
asylums.
Yeah,
And that,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
of course, again, like I said, obviously you're from across the pond. I think about it in the way that our First Amendment is religious freedom. How could they ever lock somebody up for being too extreme with their religion if we have a Bill of Rights?
Yeah, exactly. So ultimately, it boils down to someone's opinion, someone with more power than you. So it doesn't matter whether even if you weren't religious at all, if someone has decided you are, and they're in a position of power, there's very little you can do. And they were targeting women. You know, you've just lost your husband, you've got kids to raise, you've got no money coming in, you couldn't be in a more vulnerable position. So easily crushed. And they're not going to fight back, are they? And they're not going to be able to. Any argument they've got is just going to be quashed. Um, but going back to your original question, I think in amongst the orphans, the babies from the baby farms, that they were cloning, they were repopulating by cloning.
And
That's
so
what I
how
believe.
and what means like kind of the way that we're told about like Dolly the sheep? Is that like, kind of that kind
Yeah,
of a thing?
reproductive. Yeah, reproductive cloning. Incidentally, do you know why Dolly the sheep's called Dolly?
You know what? I thought I did know that, but no, go ahead, tell me.
The cell that she was created from was taken from a mammary gland, and so they named her Dolly Parton, Dolly for short.
Ah,
Yeah,
I
it's all
did
to do
not.
with the mammary. Yeah. So yes, exactly. Reproductive cloning. So I suppose it would be very similar to IVF, but without
Okay.
using a womb. It would be an artificial womb, and then you know, to get the cell uh, actually to become reproductive, it's given electrical blasts, just surges of electricity, and it starts replicating.
So do you think that's technology they still have, or do you think that's technology that was lost? That they
I think that they've been doing it for a very long time. I mean, it depends where you are with how we got here, how the Homo sapien arrived. We can follow the Darwin theory of evolution, which I believe was funded by the Vatican as an alternative to give people. So the Vatican had an element of control over an alternative story to that of Genesis. Or you can look at Genesis, where they remove a rib from Adam and create another life from that. And incidentally, with regard to that, we can say, okay, well, it's a metaphor. Well, if it's a metaphor, someone's describing cloning. So, regardless of whether it took place or not, if it's a metaphor or if it's fact, either way, to remove the rib from one person and create another life is cloning. Or we can follow the story of the Elohim or the Anunnaki, and then in that theory, we are the result of a genetically modified race based upon the Neanderthal to mine and become really a slave. So unless you're looking at evolution where we crawled out of the water, then your two options really are one way or another, cloning in one sense or another. So I think the technology's always been there. Incidentally, with Dolly the sheep, what's interesting for anybody that's a fan of the Dan Brown movies or novels, where it all takes place at the Knights Templar
Hmm.
Rosslyn Chapel, the institute in Edinburgh where Dolly was produced is Rosslyn. It's Rosslyn Institute.
Interesting.
Yeah, named after Rosslyn Chapel. So I think that there are certain people out there that have had technology passed down, um, and technology we're not privy to. And when Dolly the sheep was born, and incidentally, people will say, "Well, clones can't reproduce." Dolly had children. You've actually children had lambs,
Hmm.
children to her. But incidentally, in America, you've got a really successful racehorse that is a clone and is now at stud and very successful. I can't for the life of me remember his name, but they said at the time of Dolly the sheep that the only reason that they weren't cloning human beings was ethics. But I question that the people that control everything have any ethics.
Yeah, well, I mean, right. Well, I mean, we've long assumed around these parts is by the time they announce what they're doing, they've long been doing it, and they're
Yeah.
obviously doing way more than they say. So it is out. It's not out of the realm of possibility. I mean, you really do think about it. Like, yeah, the in vitro fertilization, all the ways that they can get people pregnant, and then when when they use these kind of means, they have like sometimes they have like 8 babies was like the octomom
Yes.
and everything. So you do kind of wonder if that's, I mean, it does seem possible that somebody could do that and in that kind of way. And if they could, would they? Yeah, I don't think the ethics would stop people. I mean, obviously we don't even want to get into all this stuff about 2020, but it does kind of seem like that there's certain kinds of labs in places like China and Ukraine where things that would not be acceptable in places like
Mm.
England in America, we wouldn't be put up with it. But the fact that these people are kind of this international, group who would
Yeah.
just move the whatever they were doing to a place that nobody would be asking questions about it. And if they did, they
Yeah.
wouldn't be around to ask anymore. So
Well,
yeah, that's interesting.
Mexico has very lax laws on human cloning. You can human clone in Mexico without committing a crime, and also in Korea. So there are certain countries where they have a very lax view and approach to the legalities of human cloning. And of course, in Canada, you've got Clonaid, and they jump on their website, and on the home page, it actually tells you the reasons that you can apply for cloning, and that can be death of a loved one. And that can be you can clone because you might be carrying a disease that you don't want to pass on, a hereditary disease. You could be HIV positive, same sex marriage, or you fancy another go at life. And it's all there on their homepage, Clonaid. And you tick whichever box, fill in an application form, and a consultant will contact you within a few days and they will clone you in black and white.
Yeah, I mean that's frightening. I mean, I guess so what would you say like your best evidence is that the Cabbage Patch Kids were cloned? Is that a theory based on the kind of stuff we're talking about now, or is it do you have
Yeah.
anything? I guess it's hard to
No.
get anything really more than that. Um, but it is interesting as the guy who always brings up all the pop culture references about things like this. Of course, you think about like Eminem, and he did one of his first big hit songs was the real Slim Shady,
Hmm.
and of course he's coming out, and I think they did it in the MTV movie Music Awards. He's got all the people looking like him coming out. I think
Yeah.
Britney Spears did
Britney Spears.
yeah,
Yeah.
she did a song where they go down into some kind of a lab, and yeah, there's a bunch of Britneys
I
in tubes.
referenced it. I actually referenced it. Of course, now I'm going to not be able to find it, but I actually referenced Britney Spears um, because it was shortly after the she released this song, and there are lyrics in there talking about being cloned. Her video showed a cloning center, And then shortly after that, she shaves all of her hair off and has what appears to be some sort of public breakdown.
Right.
And I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if that was, that was a consequence for what, what she had done. And I think she had sold her soul, and wasn't following the narrative, or wasn't following the instructions given to her. And then all of a sudden, she pays the ultimate price. Britney Spears. So the song was titled Mona Lisa, came out in 2007. She's the original. She's unforgettable. She's been cloned.
Yeah, interesting. It wasn't also,
Mm.
didn't Kanye say over the last couple
Yeah,
years, if he's gone for a certain amount of time and comes back, it's not him?
yeah,
And
yeah. And then
so,
you've got
and then he did. He went away, and then he comes
mm.
back, and let's just say Kanye was never really all that stable. But I mean, he's been pretty erratic lately. So I
Yeah,
mean, so if he wasn't the real Kanye, I mean, he did say that he wouldn't be.
yeah. And you've got Jamie Foxx as well. I mean,
Oh,
Jamie Foxx.
they cloned Tyrone. That was really weird
Yeah,
when he was in the hospital for what? I don't know how many weeks.
yeah.
Right as
Car
this
crash, didn't he?
right as this movie's coming out.
Mm.
And I remember, I remember that was the weirdest thing because I remember again, I'm making all the kind of little short videos back then on TikTok, and everyone said he's in the hospital for a while. Oh,
Mm.
they're cloning him, and then like with no, I mean like so on the nose, like literally the movie is coming out at that time where he gets released from the hospital. They clone Tyrone.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I've written about that as well. I did a bit of a deep dive on there and put a couple of examples, photographs in there of before and after. I mean, his skin tone's completely different. He's a lot lighter than he was. Um, you've also got people like Kevin Hart, who was on ESPN. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. These are channels that we don't
Oh yeah,
get
yeah,
here.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he actually was asked by Steve Verrett, I think it was. He was asked how he can turn on his TV, and he's on TV being interviewed. He goes onto Twitter. He's tweeted about something. He's reading the paper, and it's telling him that Kevin Hart's recording, and recording a new movie somewhere with Dwayne Johnson. Usually, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
The Rock.
all of these things are going on at the same time. He said, "How can we do that? How can anybody do what you're doing?" And he said, "Well, it's simple. I've been cloned. There's a good two." He actually says, "There's a good two of me." And he just laughs it off. And he said, "No, I've told you. You asked me. The cat's out of the bag. I'm here to tell you. I'm the first one that's been allowed to announce this. I've been cloned. That's how I can produce and star in 2 films a year and be everywhere at the same time." And he just laughs it off. So yeah, and then you've got that rapper Kid Boo, who came out and actually said he was made in Clone-Aid, and gives his model number. So there are a lot of people that have talked about it, and of course a lot of films about it as well, about cloning, from Star Wars to
Oh yeah,
Patch
the Clone
Town, and
Wars. Yeah,
yeah, you've got cloning everywhere. So many films are talking about cloning. Why? You know,
right. You know
did
what's
someone just imagine this?
you know what? That's funny because I'm sure you probably have already heard this, but to go back to Tesla, which is really weird. I mean, I referenced the movie The Prestige often.
Hmm.
Super fascinating movie. I mean, I think it's a really just a good movie. But sorry guys, spoilers. But Tesla invents Hugh Jackman's character, this machine that what the audience thinks is he's going to disappear and reappear somewhere else. But what the machine actually does is clone him, and the clone drops into this tank in order to get unalived. So, and it was like really weird in that movie. It was like he didn't know if like actually him was going to go into the tank or not, or if it was
Yeah.
going to be the clone. And it was like it was still him. And yeah, so the scene at the end of the movie, they're walking out of this warehouse, and there are all the tanks filled up with all the Hugh Jackmans that are. And you know what? That is, I mean, again, it's a good movie. That is really, really weird that they're saying that or Nikola Tesla, the only real character or the only real supposedly person in the movie, invented this thing that could clone somebody.
Yeah, yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? And there was a very similar film on Netflix a little while ago. Um, it was this year, and I watched it with my wife, and it was about human cloning, and it's I can't remember the name of it, but I can have a look for you. I think it's probably been taken down now because we watched it because I as soon as I saw cloning, I had to see this film, and it's based in somewhere like Bosnia, Bosnia, Serbia, somewhere like that. And it's an author and his wife travel to some luxury resort on holiday, and while they're there, they meet up with another couple, and they're involved in a hit and run. They've been drinking, and this author's driving, middle of nowhere, late at night. So this other couple encourage him to just forget about it and just drive. You know, there's nothing you can do for this person. Keep going. The next day, they're arrested, and the police give them an option. They say that you can the penalty is death for what you've done, but you can buy your way out of it. And by that they mean he can pay to have himself cloned, and they'll execute the clone. And it turns out that all the people that go to this hotel, all these rich and famous and powerful people that go to this particular resort, go there so they can commit crimes or do the most nefarious acts. But they then get to clone themselves again. So the person that gets tried for the crime is the clone. So they can go and do whatever they want, and the clone takes the rap. And the clones were being produced in the police station. I would be very surprised if it's still up.
You know what? There was
It
another. I want to
certainly
say that there
shouldn't
was
be.
another movie I saw recently, and I can't remember what it was, but it had something to do with yeah these. There were people who were created that really had no rights because they were not like real
Yeah,
people. I forgot what there was a what movie was
not
that?
the island. You're not thinking
Maybe
of
it
the
was.
island.
It was something like that where yeah they weren't allowed.
Ewan
They weren't.
McGregor.
Yeah, they were not humans because like
Yeah.
they weren't made the real way, and so therefore they didn't have the
Sorry,
same rights.
I've just found the film. The film. And I actually, when I was watching it, I described it as being almost, well, it's called Infinity Pool. It was released in 2023, but it didn't come onto Netflix till this year. So Infinity Pool. But I warn anybody watching it, although it's a thriller and it's all about cloning, I would say that that is as close to pornographic as you're going to find on Netflix or Amazon or any of those platforms. I was absolutely amazed that that would be on Netflix. I mean, it shouldn't be.
Right.
It's so I would just warn people. You know, if you've got a, you know, if you're okay with that kind of thing, fine, but don't put it on with anyone. You know, your kids or something, even if they're, you know, mid-teens and you think they're all right for an
No,
18
no.
rated horror. No, this is not. I if it wasn't for the fact that I was obsessed with human cloning, I would have turned it off. My wife and I were just sat there thinking, I cannot believe Netflix is putting this content out there.
Well, you know, it's another interesting to take it a slightly different direction. I know a lot of people, especially in the space we're in, like what you could say conspiracy. They believe that all these celebrities who kind of resemble other celebrities are the same celebrity.
Yeah.
But what if the reason why so many of them look at my cat over here. So many of them look so similar. What if it has something to do with the fact that it could have something to do with like in vitro and like literally they're
Hmm.
related and they were I don't know hatched from a cabbage patch at the same time. I mean, like whatever you want to say, like that. Is this why there's so many celebrities that look so similar? They're not exactly the same, but I mean, maybe that's kind of how
No.
more. Maybe that is that more realistic that they wouldn't be like an absolute twin of somebody, and that's why when people show like kind of really creepy old pictures and they resemble all these
Yes.
celebrities,
Yeah.
what if it was because if those old pictures would have came about the same times as the Cabbage Patch stuff, what if these people now that resemble them, it's not because it's the same person, they're a vampire. It's
Yeah.
because they were some kind of a clone.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother rabbit hole, isn't it? And I am fascinated with it because I love some of the photos that you can see. I mean, um, perhaps Eddie Murphy is one of the best ones. If you want to type in Eddie Murphy doppelganger, that one's fantastic. But there's Brad Pitt, Bruce Willis, Jay-Z, um, Eminem, and lots of them. And I don't know. Um, are these just coincidences? But I would argue at a time that a lot of these early photos were taken, it wasn't that common to have a portrait photograph taken. So the fact that someone's been able to find these and make them comparative to a modern celebrity like Bruce Willis is another one. I find very, very strange. Yeah, I mean that's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean it's
So
pretty. I mean it's like not exact, but I mean you could see like yeah, if it was like related, I mean yeah, that would I could obviously
yeah,
buy that that person was related to this other person.
but somebody told me a girl called Kelly Harding. I've been chatting to her, and she's done a few interviews on various channels on YouTube. She says that actually, yeah, that's a good one, isn't it? That what it comes down to is actually when you're born. That the time, the specific time and date that you're born, not the year, the time and the date, that will determine what you look like. Well, I personally can't get my head around that, and she tried to do it with me, and I came up with Vladimir Lenin. So I look like Vladimir Lenin,
Okay.
and I could see some similarities, but not enough for me to buy it. Then, of course, we got the whole sort of, Count of Saint Germain, haven't we? Are these people? I mean, that one's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, are these people vampires? Is that possible? Are they immortal? We've seen lots of films about that. I mean, Highlander is a good example. Um, there's also a good one of Mark Zuckerberg, and I can't remember if it's King Charles or one of the kings of Spain, but Mark Zuckerberg has a doppelganger, one of the Habsburgs.
Uh-huh.
Uh, so yeah, I mean, are these immortal? Is it time travel? Are they reincarnating? Are they clones? Do they keep constantly cloning themselves so they can keep going and have another try? I mean, this time I want to be an actor. Last time I was a military general. I don't know, but I do find the whole doppelganger thing fascinating.
Well,
Um,
to go on that point, you know, we've to plug tonight's episode of JT's mixtape again, and we talked about it last week. This is a continuation where I've been throwing out that idea is could the devil really be a man? And I don't mean the devil's actually a man, but he could be appearing to be a man. What I do think is interesting is again that words have meanings,
mm,
the names of places have meanings. That Hollywood, Los Angeles, it's the city of angels. And then, so what do they get when they make it? They get a star. So
mm,
in the Bible, angels being represented by stars or either literally being stars. That's, I mean, obviously to me, that's the best way you could have somebody that was kind of immortal would be like, what if it was some angel moonlighting as a person and they kind of look like the
yeah,
same person, but maybe slightly
it,
different. I mean, it's certainly possible, especially in the way that these people influence the populace
yes.
in a very powerful way. I mean, I do think that that makes sense, and I mean, that's the stuff that I have no doubts could be real. Now, to what level, I have no idea.
Well, I think the Hollywood connection is really important because that is where magic comes alive, isn't it? And
Absolutely,
magic wands are made from the wood from a
Hollywood.
holly tree.
Hmm.
So it's all very, very clever. And it had to be that specific place for it to all happen. So I do think so. And if you go back 100 years ago, it wasn't celebrities. I mean now you could pick here in the UK, you could pick a professional footballer and they could make a statement on Twitter and it wouldn't have to be true and everybody would believe it.
Yeah.
so much more than they would a politician, or even, you know, I don't like to use this expression, but King Charles. Even he, if he tweeted something today to say, do you know what, I think that there is life on Mars, and we're going to find out within the next 6 months, because my friend Gates told me, or Musk. Not many people would see it. Not many people would take notice of it in comparison to it being someone like, I don't know, David Beckham. Now, if he tweeted that, the amount of engagement he would have, people would say, well, yeah, well, you know, he's bound to know because he knows people. You know, you know,
Yeah.
his sort of
Hmm.
money and influence and fame. Definitely right. If they saw Charles tweeted, they'd think he'd just gone insane. That perhaps that dementia has kicked in. So you don't even have to be right now, as long as you're in a position of influence, or in the public eye, and you've got a good following on social media, you can just come out with whatever you want. And I think they've used Hollywood to do that, because they've realised that actors and singers have become more important
That's an excellent
to
point.
people.
More
Yeah,
more respected than politicians.
absolutely. Yeah, we're more likely to applaud. Um, you know, I went to a concert the other night. It was a Dire Straits tribute band, and there was a standing ovation. Now, if that had been the local MP saying that he was going to stop all of the trees from being cut down in a local forest, no one would have stood up. They'd have said, "Well, about bloody time too," or something, you
or
know.
they wouldn't
So
believe
you
him.
should, or they wouldn't have turned up. Yes, they wouldn't have believed him. Yeah, Parliament. Yeah, to lie to the mind.
Yeah,
So
I want to say something real quick about that. What you're saying about the Hollywood and the magic, and again, I like to compare this to the movie The Prestige, which I found really interesting because what they show you, and I think this is the Kabbalistic idea of what magic actually is. It's the magic is not sorcery. The magic is literally just kind of changing people's minds. It's like changing their
yeah,
consciousness to believe something. And so the fascinating part about that movie was the comparison between the contrast between Tesla, who was called a wizard, and then the two magicians were just showmen. They weren't doing real magic. All they were doing was tricking people. And then
yeah,
was the interesting part was when Hugh Jackman's character gets Tesla's machine and he shows the theater guy how it works, the guy who owns the theater,
mm,
and the guy who owned the theater immediately knows that that was actually real magic. And what he told Hugh Jackman to do is
mm,
dumb it down. Like don't
mm,
make it look like it's real.
yeah,
And I thought that's really interesting to go back to what we're just talking about. So what if that's the more idea of what they're doing is because when they actually do something that is supernatural, they make it look like it's a trick. So
yeah,
then people don't get really, it doesn't freak them out. Because
yeah,
obviously, if you knew something like that, like cloning, like to that level is real, maybe they would do it in a way where you can't make it look exactly like this person, make them look a little bit different. So
yes,
therefore, the people are not freaked out by it.
yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
that's part of the Hollywood, the magic wand and the magic of Hollywood.
It's sort of a soft disclosure, isn't it?
Hmm.
You aren't overwhelmed, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they are following, or at least fearful of karmic retribution. You know, as long as they've told us what they're doing, and even if it's in a movie, they have told us, and it's up to us to decipher that. Is it real? Is it based on? Is there any element of truth behind this? Or is it total fantasy? And if we dismiss it, well, then that's our issue, isn't it? And the same as the sort of poison apple. Uh, um, I give you an apple, I tell you there's poison in it, you eat it, you die. And then, you know, I'm not responsible for that. I told you. Now you might have thought I was joking because I said it in a jokey manner, but I'm no longer responsible. Now, if I give you that apple and you eat it and I don't tell you what's in it and something happens, then you know, that's on me. So I do believe that they're following universal law and karma, because they're fearful, and they're using Hollywood to do that. Um, and I think that that's probably the reason for Hollywood. I mean, then you've got Disney as well. I mean, Walt Disney was connected to MK Ultra.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
You know, there's lots of subliminal messaging within all of their movies. And incidentally, I think about 39 of the movies that Disney have produced out of the 140 odd, whatever it is, feature as the main character an orphan.
Yeah, that well again, that's one of those things where again to go back to to the Cabbage Patch Kids and the orphan trains, it is really odd that in the culture that there's so many movies and books about orphans. And then of
Mm,
course in the days when I'm growing up, I mean there's so many movies about that kind of stuff, but I don't really it does just seem like fiction to me because I don't live in a time where there's lots of orphans.
mm.
But yeah, like
Yeah,
again,
it's
it normalizes it a little bit. So maybe when you learn about weird anomalies about the past,
yeah.
you're like, oh, like orphans are normal. They're all good singers, and
Mm,
they're real fun, and they make it at the
yeah.
end.
Yeah, exactly. They do. They have the hero's journey, don't
Hmm.
they?
Right.
And these figures, and you know, you look at them all. I mean, the two perhaps most significant today would be um, the story of Luke Skywalker, which is the same story as Harry Potter. It's exactly the same
Yeah,
story.
they're both orphans, both
Yeah,
orphans.
one's got a wand, the other's got a lightsaber. The lightsaber, incidentally, I think is based upon the Hindu weapon called the Vajra, but that's another story.
Mm.
But I think it's a direct energy weapon, a very old direct energy weapon. But it's always, isn't it? Whether it's Iron Man, Batman, Superman, Spider Man, you know, all of these
Yeah, their parents are
superheroes.
gone. Their parents are gone, and
Yeah,
all the Disney movies. We talked about that a lot. Is that very often in Disney movies, either the beginning of the movie it shows the parents die, or they just mention that the parents are already dead.
yeah, yeah. It's very strange, isn't it? What is the need for that? You know, is it just a winning formula or is there something more to it? And I think it's programming us. I think it's subliminally programming us to have orphans in this narrative that we live in. I think it's intentional. Um, you
Yeah,
know, you
one.
could argue. Sorry,
No, I was gonna say
I,
100%, 100%.
I mean, you know, you could argue that what they're showing is it, regardless of your background, if you try hard enough, you can succeed. That is not the purpose of these movies. You know, the purpose of the movies is excitement and to make you want to go and watch the sequel these days, at least. So
Right.
I don't think that they're trying to get something out there for the good of mankind. I think they're, you know, ultimately it's money that drives these things, but the people that are controlling it are trying to, in plain sight, pass information to us. Now, whether or not they are doing that to sort of give us a nudge or, or a hint to things so we might think about it, and people like perhaps you and I and the people that are watching this are going to be more awake and more susceptible to receiving this information as something else, whereas those that we might, you know, I don't particularly like the term, but the people that are not awake, people that are asleep, or what now are referred to as NPCs, um, you know, perhaps they wouldn't see it as anything other than a great film and not read anything into it.
Right, right. Well, I mean, that's the comment I would get a lot from a lot of people when I would be picking apart movies and showing like the symbolism, and they're like, "Oh,
Mm,
it's not that deep," and you're like, "No, you're not that deep." Of course, the person who wrote so when somebody makes art, they make it for a reason,
mm,
and the reason it resonates is because there is lots of symbolism, and it comes from I think a true. Most of these movies come from, like in movies, there's like three real stories, and like obviously the hero's journey is one of them. It's these stories are repeated and they're repackaged, but they're obviously telling a story and they want to get a point across to you that again, I think that's the magic, that you left the movie with a different kind of headspace about
yes.
like where you're going to go from here. They
Yeah.
obviously they
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. I totally agree. Yeah. And I just find it so strange, you know, that this happens. But why would Disney have this obsession with orphans? And then the connection to, you know, MK Ultra. So that man appears to be the pioneer of subliminal messaging,
Yeah, trauma. I
really.
mean, we've often concluded that it could be that it's about trauma, is because that's
Mm.
how these journeys start. They start with a massive trauma, which obviously that would
Yes,
go
yes, they
right
do.
hand in hand with MK Ultra. They
Yeah,
traumatize and then they can hypnotize.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, there's other things associated with those theme parks, the tunnels, and then he's got Club 33
Oh
and so
yeah,
on.
yeah.
And it all starts to get a little bit shady. Um, so, yeah, and an FBI informer as well, Walt. So, there's kind of a lot of background to him being very much connected to, black ops, the
What about
government,
the
the military.
again the very famous one of the very first conspiracies I think I ever heard, and this is way before I was conspiratorial, was that I didn't even know it was a conspiracy that Walt Disney had himself cryogenically frozen.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I
and that's
don't
funny.
know.
We talked about when you Google Cabbage Patch, when you Google Tesla, you're gonna get dolls, you're gonna get cars. If you Google Walt Disney Frozen, you're gonna get a
You
movie
get the movie.
about princesses and
Yeah,
not about the fact that people say this. And again, I remember seeing this like on the news back in the day, and I don't know if they said it was true or not, but that's something I've always heard, that he froze himself because
yeah,
he had hoped to one day be reanimated when I guess technology was more advanced.
yeah. And I've heard exactly the same thing. I mean, first of all, like for some time now, I've heard that he was frozen, but but also that film came out specifically titled Frozen, so you can't find anything online. So it just bombards you with the film, and I think it's all very cleverly done.
I
You
think that
know.
I mean I think it makes sense that if these people are affiliated with the search engines, even
Mm.
one of the first ones or one of the more recent ones too, is that I think the latest Disney Captain America TV show was called Captain America New World Order. So if you look up New World Order, you'll find a Disney show and not
Yeah,
a wild conspiracy that every president of the United States mentions all the time.
yeah,
That's totally
yeah,
not real.
yeah, exactly. And of course, I said this in my first book. You only have to go onto the World Economic Forum's website, and they tell you there, welcome to New World Order. And Prince Philip used to talk about it was time for New World Order. We've heard so many people say this in positions of power for some time. It's happening now. We have agendas going on, Agenda 21, Agenda 30, that are happening now. I mean, I don't know what it's like here, but here in a place called Oxford, they attempted to turn Oxford into a 15-minute city, and the residents literally destroyed everything that they put up, whether it was bollards to redirect traffic, stop people from using certain roads, to surveillance cameras. The lot was destroyed overnight. But they tried, and that was part of the plan. These 15-minute cities.
Yeah, and again, if you look that term up, you'll get a Captain America TV show, and you will not get any of the clips from those people you mentioned talking about it openly.
Mm.
But hey, we've been going for almost 2 hours now. Is there anything else you wanted to hit real quickly, or anything else you kind of wanted to?
No, no. Apart from at my age, because I was a child of the 70s. Yeah, I'll probably need to go and have a pee. The prostate's not as strong as it
Oh
used
yeah,
to
no,
be.
I hear you. I know you said you were already recording a podcast earlier today, but no, this has been an awesome conversation. We'll definitely have to dig in more. Maybe have you back on the show, and if yeah,
I'd love
obviously
to.
if you want me to come on your channel anytime,
Yes,
we
yes,
could
please.
definitely discuss
Yeah.
this stuff. So why don't you tell everybody where they can get your book, and you can shoot me the links, and I can put them in
Yeah,
the
sure.
description, and yeah, and tell them where they can watch or listen to you.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, the books are available on Amazon. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a publisher to touch the content, so I had to opt for print on demand. Um, so yeah, Amazon, but I send signed copies out. A lot of people want signed copies of books generally, and
Hmm.
it doesn't cost anymore. So they can contact me directly if they want a signed one, and I ship them out. I mean, certain parts of the world it can take a little bit longer from me than it can Amazon. But yeah, if they type in on Amazon, there's paperback, hardback, and then audio book as well. But here in the UK, they can buy it from Waterstones, which is our largest bookstore. They've got one in every town and city, and a big online presence. So online or directly from me, and I'll give you the links for Amazon.
Excellent.
And if they want to get in touch, shout. Yeah, they can email me or whatever.
And yeah, I can put that in the description. Do you also have a YouTube channel, correct?
I do, yeah. Everything, my Facebook page and group and the YouTube channel, it's all Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids.
Okay, Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids on YouTube and also on Facebook. Yeah. But yeah, man, this has been great. Obviously, this is a discussion. I said I love talking old world conspiracies, and of course, yeah. Now the clone stuff. We have not actually talked about the clones too much on my channel, but that's one I've actually wondered about. So that was great to have you on to discuss that. But yeah, awesome, man.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate it. One thing I did want to ask you was,
sure,
if you could bring anybody back from the past for 1 hour to sit and have a beer with, or a cup of tea or whatever, who would it be?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about they don't even have to be dead, I said obviously it would be Jesus. If it was me,
yeah,
it would be maybe the Apostle John. You know, like I'd have a lot of questions for him. There'd be a lot of people, but yeah, it would have to be one. It would obviously be a biblical figure, because man, the questions we could ask them. Yeah. I think John might be, if it's not Jesus, it's going to be the Apostle John, because everyone always says, like when we talk about the book of Revelation and when it was supposed to happen and all that kind of stuff. It would be a very interesting conversation to have about all the things that have taken place since. And
yeah,
then we could prove that we're in the short season, guys. We could.
Yes. Yes. I mean, you know, I don't know. I think I don't know who it was. A famous philosopher said, "All I know for certain is that I know nothing at all," and I live by that, because how can we possibly know? And with AI now, how can we even determine what's real and what isn't? But I do think that I feel that we are in Satan's little season. I just know we are. You know, you can sense it, you can see it, you can feel it. So I'm with you on that. Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, it's like I like that thing, and I said I've been teasing this, and I'm sure everyone's probably rolling their eyes now, because I talked about making like a more condensed short season kind of presentation. And I did like I always thought like opening it like the Matrix would make so much sense, that like you can't really put your finger on it. You just know something's not right about the place you live. And that's kind of like what I feel with every bit of my soul. And so when people ask, are we in the short season? I would say that I'm 99.9% there.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, again, we'd have to, with humility, to say we're not like 100% positive about almost anything, but knowing it's the only thing that really makes sense to me right now.
Yeah,
it puts
totally
the most
agree.
pieces of the puzzle together, and I think that, to me, that's 100%. It makes so much sense that we're here, and it answers a lot of questions, and obviously it presents a lot more too. but obviously
that's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah. It's the pulling at the thread of a sweater. So the more you pull, it's like, man, there's, for sure. But once again, Guy, thank you so much for gracing us with your knowledge, and and it was just a fascinating conversation. For everybody in the chat, guys, God bless you guys who gave super chats. Once again, JT's mixtape is going to premiere in about 3.5 hours, so you guys be sure to check that out. And links of Guys in the description. Again, if you guys want to get healthy natural supplements, check out the sponsor, Modern Roots Life. If you want a shirt, links are in the description as well. And if you guys want to see the newest uncensored content that I make weekly, check out the Patreon so you guys can check that out. I'm putting all of the stuff so the JT's mixtape you don't have to wait till next Monday. If you do, fine. If you don't, probably be up by like about Thursday. So guys, check out the links. And again, appreciate it again, Guy, for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, Joe.
Absolutely, brother. All right. God bless all you guys. We guys see you guys next time. Okay, Let's stop this. You might want to hang on